I've always believed that nature has its own voice. When you're alone in the woods long enough, you start to hear it. Not just birds or leaves rustling, but something deeper, something older. I never really feared the forest until last fall. My girlfriend Lila and I had been together for 4 years. We were that kind of couple who always wanted to unplug, always searching for the next hike or national park to explore. We'd been planning a long weekend camping trip for months. No phones, no GPS, just maps, gear, and each other. It was supposed to be romantic, peaceful. It was anything but. We chose a place way off the grid, part of the Black Hollow Forest in northern Idaho. You probably haven't heard of it. It's not on tourist blogs or park lists. I found it buried in an old forum for backcountry hikers. Someone mentioned it, and it had some of the best stargazing in the state and absolutely no traffic. That should have been a red flag right there. We parked our truck near an old fire road. We parked our truck near an old fire road and hiked 6 miles into dense forest. The deeper we got, the quieter it became. Birds were sparse. No distant hum of traffic, not even the buzz of insects. It was the nature itself that was holding its breath. Still, we brushed it off. Lila joked it was perfect horror movie territory, and of course I laughed. I wish I hadn't. We set up camp beside a narrow creek, the kind of place that looked untouched by people. We pitched our tent in a clearing, surrounded by towering pines, and got a fire going just before dusk. As the sun dipped below the trees, a deep chill crept in. Not just cold, but something colder than I've ever felt in September. And that night, everything changed. So this was the first sound I heard. The first strange thing happened just after midnight. We were bundled in our sleeping bags, and I had just started to drift off when I heard it, a soft crunch of leaves. Not constant, just one step, then nothing, then another, then nothing. I sat up, heart pounding. Lila stirred beside me. "You hear that?" I whispered. She rubbed her eyes and then said, "It's probably a deer." I wasn't so sure. It was too deliberate. One step, pause, another step. Not the scurrying of an animal, more like someone trying not to be heard. I unzipped the tent slowly and peeked out. The fire had died to embers, casting a faint orange glow. Trees loomed in every direction. I didn't see anything, but I felt something. You know that prickly sensation like someone's behind you? That's what I had, like a pressure on my neck. I scanned the tree line, and there was nothing. Eventually, the sound stopped, and I climbed back in. We tried to laugh it off. Maybe it was just us spooking each other. But Lila was quiet, and she was listening too. Now the next day was overcast. The forest felt different. It was too still, like it was watching us. Lila wanted to move camp, but I convinced her to stay. And I just told her it was our nerves. We spent the day hiking, trying to shake it off. We even climbed a ridge and found a half-collapsed lookout tower. It looked like it hadn't been used in decades. Inside were rusted tools and what looked like an old forestry radio. It was long dead. The night after dinner, we sat beside the fire in silence. Even Lila wasn't cracking jokes anymore. As darkness crept in, I felt that same pressure again. That sensation of being watched. I scanned the woods. Nothing. Until we both saw it. About 20 feet away, behind a tree, something moved, and it wasn't an animal. It was upright. Just a glimpse. It had pale skin, a face, but it was gone in a blink. I saw Lila stand up, and she was like, "Did you?" I was like, "Yeah," I said, and I was grabbing my flashlight. I aimed it toward the tree, but there wasn't anything there. Just rough bark and falling needles. We didn't sleep that night. On the third night, though, things escalated. It started with whispers. Not loud, but close, like someone was mumbling just outside the tent. The words weren't clear, almost like another language. Lila grabbed my arm. Her eyes were wide with fear. "Jason, do you hear that?" And I nodded, just not trusting myself to speak. I grabbed the flashlight and opened the tent flap. As soon as the light hit the clearing, the whispering stopped. The silence afterward was worse. I panned the beam across the trees. Nothing. That's when we saw the symbols. All around the campsite, carved into trunks, were crude shapes. Circles with lines through them, crosses, spirals, dozens, maybe more. They hadn't been there when we set up. We packed our stuff before sunrise. We didn't wait for breakfast. As soon as the sun hinted at the horizon, we stuffed our packs and we started hiking back the way we came. Now, the trail should have been easy to follow. We marked it with orange ribbons, a trick Lila had learned in Scouts, but the ribbons were gone. Every single one. The forest didn't look the same either. We couldn't even agree on the direction we'd come from. The map was useless. The compass spun slowly in my hand. Not wild, just subtly wrong, as if something was interfering. We tried retracing our steps anyway, and hours passed. The sun barely seemed to move. Lila kept glancing over her shoulder. I was doing the same. At one point, she froze and grabbed my arm. "Jason, look." And of course I turned, and behind us, maybe 100 feet away, stood a figure. Now at first I thought it was a tree, but it was too straight and too narrow. And the head, yes, it had a head, tilted, and it was watching us. I blinked, and it was gone. We didn't speak, we just ran. So around noon, we came to a part of the forest I didn't remember at all. A twisted grove of pine trees. Their trunks bent unnaturally as if they'd grown away from something. The bark was blackened in places, and the forest floor was soft, almost spongy, and it reeked of rot. Lila stumbled, and she gasped. She tripped on something, a bundle of sticks wrapped in what looked like animal hide. It was tied with red twine, too. So we stared at it, unsure if it was a trap or worse, a warning. We kept going until we found the tree. It was massive, split down the middle like lightning had hit it decades ago. But what got me were the carvings. There were faces, hundreds of them, human faces etched into the bark. Their mouths were open in frozen screams, eyes hollow and gouged deep. Each one different, each one looked real. I don't know why we stopped to look. It was like the tree demanded it. Then something inside the trunk moved. A hand, pale, too thin, claw-like fingers, reached out for a second and pulled back into the darkness. The slit in the tree sealed on its own, bark creaking like bones grinding. Lila was sobbing at this point. We have got to get out of here now. So, we hiked until dark without ever seeing a break in the trees. It was like the forest had swallowed the sky. Eventually, we were too exhausted to go on. So we sat up camp. No fire this time. We didn't want to be seen. The wind picked up just after midnight. howling like voices. Not like it was going through the trees, but like the trees themselves were making the sound. They were screaming. There was moaning. That's when we heard footsteps again. But this time, there were dozens, maybe more, circling us. We held each other and stayed silent. Something brushed the tent wall, something with fingers. Then came the laughter. Quiet. It was wrong. It was too close. I snapped. I grabbed a hatchet and burst out of the tent, flashlight in my other hand. Nothing. Empty woods. But the tent? It was covered in handprints. Not human ones. It was too long. Too wide. Too many fingers. So we ran again. We barely spoke. We didn't eat. The forest was shifting around us. Trees in places they hadn't been, paths looping back. Lila swore she saw her own backpack hanging from a branch at one point, even though it was strapped to her shoulders. Around mid-afternoon, we stumbled into a clearing. In the center was a wooden structure, an old altar or shrine, covered in moss and bone ornaments, feathers, teeth, and clothes. Hiking gear, torn jackets, rotted shoes, a watch, and the watch was still ticking. Then we heard crying. From the woods behind us, it sounded like a child's voice calling for help. Lila almost ran toward it, but I stopped her. "It's not real," I said. "It's not real." The crying turned into growling. Then it stopped. By the fourth day, we were out of water. The creek we found was filled with dead fish, floating belly up. Everything tasted like rust. Our lips cracked. Our legs bled from thorns that hadn't been there the day before. We started seeing things in the trees. Faces again, but now in the bark, the leaves. Even the shadows. Some were smiling. Others looked angry. That night, we didn't set up the tent. We just huddled together on the ground. I thought Lila had fallen asleep, but around 3 a.m. she sat up suddenly. "They're here." I listened. Nothing. Then, a low chanting sound. All around us. I stood and turned in circles with the flashlight, but no matter where I aimed, the light barely penetrated the dark. Then, one beam hit something. Eyes. Too many. They reflected back at me from every direction. We ran, screaming into the black. We don't know how we made it out. One moment we were stumbling through endless trees, and the next we were standing on the fire road. Just like that. It was dawn. The sun was rising. Birds were singing. Like nothing had ever happened. Our truck was parked right where we left it. Untouched. I don't remember driving. I don't remember anything until we hit the main road. Lila and I don't talk much anymore. Not about the trip. Not about anything, really. She doesn't sleep well. Neither do I. She won't go near woods, and I had to move out of her apartment just to get away from the sound of trees and the wind. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I see that tree again, the one with faces, and sometimes I think one of them looks like me. So, fast forward 6 months. I'd like to tell you we're fine now. That we saw something weird, got lost, and that was the end. But it didn't end. Not really. It started small. The first night back, I woke up exactly at 3:12 a.m. My chest was tight, like someone had been pressing down on me. I thought it was stress, PTSD or something. Then I saw the handprint on the window. It was faint, just condensation. But it had too many fingers, and it was on the inside. Lila had her own experience. I found her crying in the kitchen 3 nights later. She said she'd been hearing whispering in the static of her TV, even when it was off. When I stayed the night, I heard it too. "Come back," it said. "You were never supposed to leave." So a week later, I woke up in the woods behind my apartment building, barefoot, no coat, just pajamas and blood on my hands. Not mine. I never sleepwalked before. There were pine needles embedded in my skin. When I got home, I found a crudely made bundle on the doorstep, just like the one Lila tripped over in the forest. This one had a tooth in it, a human one. I tried to burn it, but it wouldn't catch. So that night I heard something scraping inside the walls. Another incident. Lila's been different since the forest. She barely talks, but she draws. She draws pages and pages, crude sketches in charcoal, covering every inch of her walls. Most of them are trees, some are faces, some are things. Twisted figures with limbs too long and heads like deer skulls. But one drawing scared me more than the others. It was a map of our campsite, and around it were figures like sentinels closing in. When I asked where she saw them, she said, "They showed me." She said she sees them every night, just at the edge of her vision. They want us to come back. They said we belong. I couldn't take it anymore. The dreams, the voices, the handprints on my mirror. So I went back. Alone. It wasn't rational. I know that now. But I had to know if we'd brought something with us, or if we had just left part of ourselves behind. I needed closure. I told no one. I took the truck, same supplies. I followed the same fire road. It was still there, like nothing had happened. But it felt different. There were no birds, no bugs. The trees were wrong, straighter than I had remembered. Watching. I found the old clearing, though it looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The remnants of our campfire were gone, but the symbols were still carved in the trees. Now deeper, almost bleeding sap-like open wounds. I didn't stay long. I turned back at dusk, but the path was gone. So, that night in the forest, it's really hard to explain. They came when the moon rose. Not animals, not ghosts. They were tall, gaunt-like silhouettes cut out of shadow. Their eyes glowed dull white like dying stars. They didn't speak, they watched. I couldn't move. My legs failed me. I sat there, heart in my throat, waiting to die. Or worse. Then they did something I'll never forget. They knelt, one by one, like I was a guest of honor. Then they melted into the ground, one after the other, and I heard them whisper again. Not in my ears, but inside my head. "You're part of us now." I woke up at the edge of the fire road. No memory of walking there. My pack was gone. My boots were soaked in black water. When I got home, Lila was waiting on my porch. She looked at me and said, "You saw them?" I nodded. Then she showed me her wrist. The same symbol, a circle with lines through it, carved into her skin. Not deep, but fresh. I had the same one, on my back. I still don't know how it got there. We haven't spoken much since, but we both know the truth. We didn't leave the forest. It left something with us. There are hours I can't account for. Days even. I'll find photos on my phone of the woods, taken at strange angles. Some are blurry, some show faces, but not ours. Sometimes I'll wake up with dirt under my fingernails. One time, my boots were soaked with creek water, and there was a feather tied around my ankle with red twine. That's when I started locking my doors, but it didn't help. A month ago, I went for a walk just to clear my head. It was a short trail near town, paved even, but halfway through the trail forked, and there was no fork on the map. I took it, of course. It led me to a small clearing, one tree, carved with faces. My face was one of them. But this is where it gets sad. 3 days ago, Lila vanished. She left her apartment unlocked, no sign of a struggle. Her phone was on the table, and it was still recording. The last thing she said was, "I'm going home." They found her boots near the edge of the forest, but not her. So I'm telling you this because if you hear the whispers, if you see the symbols, don't follow them. Don't investigate. Don't go deeper. Because the forest isn't just alive, it's aware. It lets you in, but it decides if you leave, and even then, you're never really free. Sometimes I hear her voice in the trees outside my apartment window. "Jason." And sometimes, when I look in the mirror, my reflection smiles before I do, because part of me stayed in that forest, and now it wants the rest back. I needed to get out of Chicago. After a brutal work year, a breakup that left me hollow, and too many nights hunched over glowing screens, I needed something quiet, something real. So I loaded up my Jeep and drove north, past Milwaukee, past Green Bay, and even further, until the Wi-Fi bars disappeared and the roads narrowed into gravel. So the Porkies are about as remote as you can get in the Midwest without crossing into Canada. The Porkies stands for the Porcupine Mountains. Rugged and wild, they're real. It feels like real wilderness. Perfect for someone like me, mid-30s, moderately experienced in the backcountry camping, and in desperate need of solitude. I signed in at the visitor center, collected my backcountry permit, and asked the ranger which sites were least trafficked. "You want quiet?" he asked, eyeing my pack. "Take Mirror Lake Loop, but stay past the falls. You'll be alone out there. Real alone." Of course I nodded, maybe a bit too eagerly. By early morning I had hiked in 5 miles and set up camp next to a glacial lake, so still it reflected the trees like glass. My campsite was shaded by old-growth hardwoods, and I could hear the soft gurgle of a nearby brook. No phone signal, no traffic, just the hum of insects and the whisper of leaves. That night, I cooked freeze-dried chili, sipped lukewarm coffee, and wrote in my weathered leather journal. When the sun dipped below the ridge, I crawled into my tent and let the sounds of the forest rock me to sleep. I woke sometime around 2 a.m. to a sound I didn't recognize. Not the hoot of an owl or even a coyote. This was heavier. It was thudding, something walking or stomping through the brush, and it was big. It sounded confident, maybe 30 feet from my tent. My heart kicked into overdrive. I lay perfectly still, clutching my knife under the sleeping bag like it would make any difference if the black bear wanted it, or wanted in. The steps stopped. Then I heard breathing, deep and rasping, like someone with lungs full of gravel. After what felt like an hour, but was probably 5 minutes, the breathing receded, the steps faded, and there was silence again. After that, I didn't sleep the rest of the night. So when dawn finally crept over the trees, I emerged from the tent with a shaky grip on the camp shovel. I found no claw marks in the trees, no torn gear, just one thing: tracks. There was 4 of them, pressed into the muddy earth near the water. They looked like bear prints, almost, but they were longer. The toes were widely spaced and the claws were curved. Now, I've seen bear prints before. These were not bear. I took a photo with my phone. No signal to send it, but I figured I'd show a ranger when I left. By the time the sun was fully up, I had half convinced myself the prints were just a large black bear with oddly spaced paws. Maybe it stepped weird. Maybe the mud distorted the shape. Still, I packed up camp and moved on. I hadn't come all this way to let a few nighttime noises spook me. Besides, the Porkies are crawling with black bears. It's not unheard of for one to come sniffing around. If I was careful and stored my food properly, I'd be fine. At least, that's what I told myself. I hiked another 4 miles that day and pitched camp on a rise overlooking the valley. The wind up there was constant, hissing through the tall grass and keeping the mosquitoes away. By the time I made camp and filtered water from a spring-fed stream nearby, I was exhausted. The unease from the night before had begun to feel distant, almost silly. I even laughed at myself while making dinner. That was the last time I laughed on that trip. That night I woke again. Not to footsteps this time, to silence. It's a strange thing. When the forest goes still, there's just something weird about it. And not just the quiet, it really was silent, like the life had been drained from it. No frogs, no crickets, no rustle of leaves, even the wind had stopped. Then I heard sniffing. It was just outside the tent wall, low to the ground, long inhales, like it was memorizing my scent. I didn't dare move. I kept my breathing shallow, heart hammering so loud I was sure it could hear me. Then a sound I'll never forget. It exhaled, and in that breath there was something wrong. Like the wet gurgle of a broken pipe mixed with a low, throaty growl. Not a bear, not a deer, but something else. It shuffled around the tent once. I saw the silhouette briefly as it passed in front of the moonlit fabric. It was broad, it was tall, it was hunched. There was fur, but standing too high off the ground, moving on 2 legs. When I looked again, it was gone. At first light, I packed up and left. No coffee, no breakfast, just a tight pack and my knife close at hand. I hiked back toward Mirror Lake, figuring if I could find another camper or even cell signal, I might hike out early. The feeling of being watched was constant now. Not just unease, but something heavier. I found myself glancing over my shoulder every few minutes. Then I saw it. Across the ravine, maybe 60 yards away, partially obscured by trees, it looked like a bear. Hulking, black, shaggy. But it was upright. Its front limbs hung too long, nearly to the knees. And its face. Its face looked wrong. Too flat. The eyes too small. The eyes too small. And it was looking at me. I froze. It didn't move. It just stared. Then, without warning, it dropped to all fours and disappeared into the brush. Fast. Faster than anything that big should move. So I ran. What else could I do? I nearly tripped on roots twice, but I kept going until my legs burned. By the time I made it to the Mirror Lake campsite, I was soaked with sweat and shaking. No one was there, not a soul. I stayed at the Mirror Lake site that night. I didn't have much of a choice. My legs were rubber, my water supply was low, and I needed sleep. I hoped the creature, or whatever it was, had lost interest. Maybe it was territorial and I had wandered too close. I had wandered too close to its range. But deep down, I didn't believe that. I could feel it still out there. I set up camp with trembling hands, forced myself to eat jerky and trail mix, and built a small fire. It was stupid. I knew fires in the backcountry could be dangerous, but I needed the light. I needed something to chase away the dark. I didn't sleep inside the tent that night either. I sat by the fire with my knife unsheathed, a flashlight in my lap, and a bear horn gripped so tightly my fingers went numb. Just after midnight, it started again. A crack of a branch. Not subtle, not accidental. Like something heavy stepping on it, announcing itself. I turned my headlamp on and pointed it toward the sound. The light caught something. Not eye shine like an animal's, but the dull reflection of wet fur. It ducked behind a tree and was gone again. This continued for hours. Every time I drifted or blinked too long, I heard it move. It stayed just far enough away that I couldn't get a good look. When I called out, "Get the hell away from me!" it mimicked the noise back at me. Not exactly, just a warped echo. "Hell away, hell away." It wasn't a bear. Around 3 o'clock a.m., it stopped. No more movement. No more sound. I stayed up until the sun rose. Then I ran again. I figured I was about 10 miles from the ranger station on the eastern boundary of the park. I could make it in 2 days, maybe one if I really pushed it. But my body was already faltering. Fatigue, dehydration, the creeping cold of sleepless nights. I hiked all morning. No sightings. But it left things for me now. A shredded bit of cloth from my pack, something I hadn't even noticed missing. A pile of stones arranged in a circle, a tree stripped of bark, claw marks spiraling up its trunk unnaturally. Then, near a shallow creek where I stopped to refill my water bottle, I saw something that made me stagger. A footprint, in the mud, clear as day. It was bear-like, 4 toes, no heel, not really, just a pad. But it was massive, and it was followed by a second one, and both were upright, 2 feet, not 4. I made it to an older ranger cabin, marked on the map just before dusk, one of those ancient log shelters built in the 50s, falling apart but dry inside. It wasn't locked, and I rushed in, slammed the warped door shut, and wedged a log across the frame. I didn't sleep, of course. I sat in the corner with my flashlight pointed at the door and a small hatchet beside me. Every so often, I'd hear it again, pacing outside, circling. Once, it tried the door, not with a paw, but with a hand. I swear to God, I heard fingers brush against the latch. It tapped. Once, twice. Then it mimicked the creak of the door hinge. It was learning. The next morning, I was gaunt, shivering and barely able to think. But I pushed on. Just 5 more miles. I could make it. I had to. At one point, I thought I saw another hiker in the distance, through a break in the trees. Someone in a gray hoodie, walking toward the ridgeline. I screamed for help. The figure turned. It had no face, just skin, stretched where the features should have been. Then it dropped on all fours and bolted into the brush with that same jerking, unnatural motion I'd seen before. I didn't scream again. Somewhere near the final mile, I began to hallucinate. I thought I saw my ex-girlfriend standing beside a pine tree, holding my coat. I thought I heard my own voice whisper, "It's behind you." And I turned. Nothing. But when I looked back, the coat I had dropped days earlier was hanging from the branch. It was clean, it was folded. It had followed every step. When the ranger station finally appeared through the trees, squat wooden, Manned by a summer seasonal worker with a radio and a confused look on his face, I fell to my knees. He ran out, helped me inside. I was dehydrated, bleeding from a gash I didn't remember getting, and shaking uncontrollably. I didn't try to explain right away. Not until hours later, in the back of an ambulance, did I mumble, "It looked like a bear, but it wasn't." So they kept me overnight at the clinic in Ontonagon, hooked up to an IV, wrapped my arm, where I'd apparently scraped it on a jagged branch or rock, though I still don't remember doing it. The nurse said I'd been suffering from exposure, maybe hallucinating, but I hadn't imagined that thing. The ranger who'd found me, we'll call him Collins, sat with me the next morning. He was young, probably mid-20s, with a short beard and a tan line from his sunglasses. "I know you're shaken up," he said, "but can you try to tell me what happened out there? You were on the Mirror Lake loop, right?" I nodded. I was followed. Something kept tracking me. I think it's still out there. He gave me a careful look. An animal? And then I said, "I thought it was a bear at first, but it wasn't. It looked like one from the distance. Big, black, but it moved wrong. And its face..." And that's when I stopped and my hands trembled. He leaned back, crossing his arms. "You're not the first one to say something like that." That made me look up. "What do you mean?" There have been stories. Rangers won't talk about them on the record, but people see things out there. Something big. Sometimes it mimics voices or looks like a person. Sometimes it looks like a bear. Locals call it the hollowback. That name lodged in my brain like a splinter when he said that. They discharged me that afternoon. I should have gone straight home. Headed south, disappeared back into the city. But I didn't. Like an idiot, I went back. Not far, just to the edge of the preserve. I had to know if it was real. I had to see it again. I don't know why. Maybe it was obsession. Maybe I didn't want to believe I'd gone mad. I parked at the visitor's lot and hiked a mile back in, just before sundown. I brought nothing but my flashlight, a knife, and a flare gun I'd been given at the station. The woods were dead quiet. I waited, and eventually, it came. Not with a roar, not charging, just standing there, 100 feet away beneath a gnarled hemlock. It looked like a bear, the bulk, the fur, the posture, but then it stood fully upright. And it kept standing, 7, maybe 8 feet tall, limbs too long, shoulders too narrow, and that face. It had pieces of a bear's face. Fur, a snout, but the eyes, no. They were too close together, too intelligent, and its mouth hung open, revealing teeth that didn't match. Rows of them. It took one step toward me, and then it said my name. Not quite right, drawn out, warped, but it said, "James." I turned and ran. Branches whipped my face. I dropped the knife. I almost tripped over a root, caught myself. Behind me, I heard it crashing through the brush, faster than before, no longer hiding. I turned and fired the flare gun. Red fire screamed into the night sky, bursting against the canopy. The creature didn't scream. It didn't flinch. It just didn't stop. I looked back again. There it stood, lit in red firelight, towering and wrong. Its fur smoked. Its skin bubbled beneath the heat. But it just stared, eyes reflecting the flare's dying light. It opened its mouth again. This time it said something else. "You're mine now." And then it turned and vanished into the trees. I didn't stop running until I hit pavement. When I finally collapsed in the parking lot, the flare gun slipped from my fingers, and I sobbed so hard I nearly blacked out. I never went back. I haven't been back to the Porcupine Mountains or anywhere near the Upper Peninsula. Hell, I barely go outside the city anymore. I moved to a high rise in downtown Chicago, somewhere with glass and noise and other people. I haven't slept in a tent since. Sometimes I think I'll forget what happened, like time will sand it down into a half memory, the way trauma sometimes fades, but it doesn't. If anything, it's gotten worse. At night, I hear things, not outside, but inside. A whisper in the vents, a shape reflected in windows that disappears when I turn. Sometimes I dream of it, the hollowback. I see it standing at the tree line, its skin pulling tight over its two long limbs, waiting, watching. I wake up drenched in sweat, heart galloping. I saw a therapist twice, told her I got lost on a hike and hallucinated. She recommended anxiety meds, and I suggested I avoid triggering environments. No one believes me, not really, except one single person. 3 weeks ago, after I got back, I received a package. No return address, and inside was a manila envelope with a photo. It was grainy, blown up, black and white. It showed a dark, humanoid shape standing beside a trail sign that read, Mirror Lake Loop. There was no note, typed on an old manual typewriter, and it said, You're not crazy. You're not the first. Stay out of the woods. It doesn't forget. Under that, a number, Michigan area code, so I called it once. It rang 7 times, and then, Don't call here again, said a man's voice. You saw it. That's enough. Click. Don't call here again, said a man's voice. You saw it. That's enough. Put the photo back in the envelope, sealed it. I keep it in a drawer, unopened. I haven't opened it since. I know what you're thinking. I know what everybody's thinking that's hearing this right now, that I made it up, that it was stress, dehydration, or too much alone time. That's what I tell myself sometimes. It's easier than the alternative. But then I remember the way it moved, the way it said my name, and I know something is out there, in the woods, deep, old, and hungry. So if anybody out there right now ever finds yourself hiking in the Midwest, especially near the Porkies, and you see what looks like a bear in the trees, don't stare too long. If it starts walking upright, don't run toward it, run away. If it speaks your name, pray it doesn't know how to follow, because once it sees you, once it decides you are interesting, it never forgets. Hey everyone, I just want to take the time and thank you for listening to my stories, and I take suggestions, and if anybody has a personal story of theirs, whether it's camping, hiking, stalking, paranormal, anything out of the ordinary, please feel free to email me at bobbyrebholtz@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to read it, and maybe it'll be featured on this channel. Can't wait to read more stories from the public. There's a lot of really great stories out there that are untold. So thanks again for listening, folks. If you'd enjoyed it, hit the notification bell. And if you like it, hit the like button. Till next time, peace.